Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of history's greatest puzzles, a lost world that was just forgotten for 4,000 years.
Just try to imagine this. A civilization way more widespread than ancient Egypt, with a massive population, up to 5 million people living in cities so advanced they had indoor plumbing. I mean, we're talking perfectly planned streets and super sophisticated plumbing systems, all built thousands of years before the Roman Empire even got started. So the big question is, right, how does a world this massive, this advanced, just poof, vanish from history? Okay, let's dive into this incredible archaeological mystery and start piecing together the clues. I mean, for 4,000 years, nobody had a clue this civilization even existed. It was just a total blank spot in the history books. Then, boom, the 1920s roll around, and archaeologists in what's now Pakistan stumble onto the ruins of these enormous, ancient cities. And suddenly, the whole story started to change.
And look, this wasn't some flash in the pan. The Indus civilization was around for 2,000 years. Its golden age, what we call the mature Harappan phase, lasted for an incredible 700 years. That's when their great cities were really thriving.
All right, so where do we start? Our first big clue comes right from the ground itself, from the absolutely incredible cities they built. The most famous ones are called Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, and honestly, they are mind-blowing. The level of planning here is just astonishing. You've got streets laid out on a perfect grid, buildings made from standardized fire-baked bricks. And get this, they engineered the world's first known urban sanitation systems. We're talking homes with their own toilets that connected to covered drains in the street. This just screams a powerful, super organized government that actually cared about public health. And we're not just talking about a couple of cities here. Archaeologists have found over 1,000 different sites, big and small, spread out across a massive area of South Asia. This was one of the most widespread civilizations of the ancient world, period. But what's really telling is what they chose to build. The biggest public structure we found, it wasn't a palace for a king or some huge tomb. Nope. It was this, the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro. This enormous, beautifully constructed pool was likely used for religious ceremonies, which tells you right away how important water and ritual purity were in their society. Okay, so they were amazing builders. But what about the people themselves? Who were they? Well, our next clue suggests they were really different from pretty much everyone else at the time, like the Egyptians or Mesopotamians. You know, unlike their neighbors, there's no clear evidence of all-powerful kings living in giant palaces. We haven't found any grand royal tombs filled with treasure. And maybe the most surprising thing of all, very few weapons have ever been found. This points to a society that was remarkably peaceful, and maybe even more equal. A real outlier in the war-torn Bronze Age. This peaceful society was also incredibly organized. They actually created one of the first systems of standardized weights made from the stone called shirt that were used for trade across hundreds of miles. Even their bricks were made in consistent, uniform sizes across the whole civilization. That kind of standardization is a huge sign of a well-run society. And their art, wow, it was stunningly ahead of its time. When Sir John Marshall, the archaeologist who led the digs, first saw this small bronze statue of a dancing girl, it just blew his mind. He said he couldn't believe something so lifelike and modern could be thousands of years old. Okay, now we get to the biggest clue of all, which, ironically, is also the biggest mystery. We're talking about the thousands of tiny artifacts they left behind that contain their lost language. So these little stone seals are the most common source of their writing. They were used like stamps, probably to mark ownership of goods for trade. And we know this because these exact seals have been found hundreds of miles away in Mesopotamia. They often have these beautiful carvings of animals on them, bulls, elephants, and even what some people think are unicorns. And this is their script. We've identified over 400 unique symbols, but the messages are incredibly short, usually just 5 symbols or so. For decades, the world's best code breakers have tried to crack it, and nobody can. It's a 4,000-year-old code that remains completely unbroken. So, until we can crack this code, the deepest secrets of their government, their religion, and their daily lives are still a mystery. These seals are just sitting there, holding their stories, waiting for someone to finally read them. So, what happened to these master builders and peaceful traders? For a long time, the leading theory was some kind of violent invasion. But, modern science is pointing to a very different and much slower culprit. Yeah, the old theory from the 50s was that invaders called Aryans swept in and destroyed the cities. But modern analysis has pretty much debunked this. When they re-examined the skeletons, they found no signs of violence from a battle. The evidence for some big, violent end just isn't there. The real answer, it seems, is climate change. This whole civilization was built on the floodplains of mighty rivers that were fed by powerful summer monsoons. But around 1800 BCE, the climate shifted. It got cooler and drier, the monsoons got weaker, and those rivers that were their lifeblood began to dry up or become unpredictable. Without that reliable water for crops, the huge cities just couldn't support everyone, forcing a massive migration to the east. But here's the final twist in our mystery. The Indus people didn't just vanish into thin air. They adapted, they moved, and they transformed. That's right, they didn't just disappear. They abandoned the big cities and moved into smaller, rural villages, heading east toward more reliable rivers. They adapted their way of life, and their culture lived on, influencing the future of the entire subcontinent. Their legacy is absolutely immense. They were pioneers in agriculture and wheeled transport. Their concepts of city planning and sanitation were literally thousands of years ahead of their time. Even some of their artistic and religious symbols may have evolved into ideas still present in India today. It just proves that even a so-called lost civilization can profoundly shape the future. So, in the end, the story of the Indus Valley wasn't one of a sudden, violent end, but of a slow human adaptation to a changing world. It's a powerful reminder that even the greatest civilizations can be reclaimed by nature, their stories buried right beneath our feet, just waiting to be rediscovered.